Right, I thought to give you feedback. I think today's day 9. So I'm going to give you feedback in terms of the challenge that I've got, the physical challenge that I've got, but I also thought let me combine it with a lesson or a tip. And the thing that I want to talk about is basically why the quality of any answer is directly determined by the quality of the question. And I think, I hope that that to some of you will be of interest. If you're going to ask the wrong questions in life, you're always going to get the wrong answers. I can almost say it's that simple. And the reason for that is that by asking the wrong question, you've got no option but to get the wrong answer. So if we are asked the right questions and teach our brains basically how to ask the right questions, we're always going to get to the right answers. And I think what we should do is to learn how to ask the right questions at the right time, because we can ask the right question, but if the timing is not right, then the question or the answer to that question is not going to mean anything. Right, now I've learned this lesson way back in 1987. So in 87, I wanted to become rich. That was my goal. That was the reason why I took on the job. I was a financial planner at that stage, or a financial advisor, learning how to become a financial planner at a later stage. And I could not figure out what on earth to do in order to become financially free. It simply, I couldn't figure that out. Until I asked the question, what was the growth on my property investment in my house? And that led to a whole process. In order to be able to find out what the growth was, I had to figure out, I had to develop a whole program, because at that stage, nothing was available for me to calculate the growth. And I then asked the questions, but how many variables are here when we talk in terms of property? And it took me a while to figure out that there were 27 variables. And then I asked the question, but what impact does these variables and what impact will they have in terms of the investment value? And is there a difference between the investment value and the capital growth value of a property? And of course, some of you will know the answer, but the end result was that I make a distinction between the capital appreciation or depreciation of a property and the investment value of a property. So immediately, the moment that you separate the two, you're going to find that when you invest in property, you're not investing, the property is just the instrument that you use. It's got nothing to do with if it's a good or a bad area and stuff like that. So that then led to the next question: what is the growth on my investment? Because to calculate the growth on the area, on the capital growth wasn't too difficult. So that then, as soon as I discovered that there's 27 variables. And then I asked myself the question, and I simply said, but what has the variables got to do in terms of the growth? And what is the risk factor? And then I discovered that it's actually the risk that we need to understand, because that's the 27 variables. And by understanding the risk, we can literally, by increasing our knowledge about the risk and gaining competency around that, we can lower the risk. And by lowering the risk, we increase the growth automatically. So that was incredible. And basically that is, I think, what Socrates and those people were doing many thousands of years ago, was by asking the right questions to their students, getting them to start thinking for themselves. In other words, start taking responsibility. So as soon as I've done that, I wanted to then know, but what's the growth on my investment in the house that I'm staying in? In other words, in the property, my residential, my home. And I calculated that it was 47%. And then I asked another question, and I said, okay, because I knew that 47% at that stage, this was way back in 1987, outperformed any other class of investment that I could have invested in, right? So I knew that I was on the right track. But then I sat down and I thought, okay, if I could get 47% compared to 15 and 18% with other investments, if I've got 1,000 Rand, at what growth must this 1,000 Rand, in other words, at what work rate must it work for me in order to be able to be financially free within 10 years? So I asked the question, what must the growth be on my 1,000 Rand investment so that I will be financially free in 10 years' time, right? Now, the reason, and I then ask a question, but what do I mean with financial freedom? And with financial freedom at that stage, I simply said that, first of all, to have the same kind of income that I was earning at that stage, that I identify as being financially independent. Financial free is to have at least twice the amount that I need per month to have the standard of living that I had. And by the way, at that stage, it was just over 6,000 Rand per month. And then I said, okay, but in order to be rich, in other words, to have a life of abundance, or at least that's the way that I described it at that stage, I need at least 3 times. So when I refer to financially free, I mean that we should actually have 3 times more than our standard of living. Can you see that by asking the questions, what do I want, by when do I want it, and how do I define that I want? Just by doing that, I started formulating a baseline, outline for myself. And then I said, okay, but on 1,000 Rand, to get to 3 times more, which is about 20,000 Rand, what growth rate must I get? And I calculated that at just over 55%. So that then became the benchmark. But I hope that you can see what is happening here. And that is that unless I've asked those questions in the sequence that I've asked them, I would never have been in a position where I could calculate what I now call my financial freedom growth rate. So once I've got the financial freedom growth rate, the next question was, but what type of investments would give me this type of growth? And it was, well, at that stage, I knew that property had a chance because I already had 47%. And as soon as I started analyzing property on the Property Pro investment system, I discovered that property can definitely give it to you. That was in March of 1987. In May of 87, I discovered that your business could do exactly the same. So you've got your business and your property that could outperform your financial freedom growth rate. So unless you understand and know what your financial freedom growth rate is, you do not have a benchmark in any other investment or any investment that is not going to give you that, well, that is not going to be an investment to look at. Right, so those were the questions that I've asked, and that is basically what started the process. So I basically then immediately asked, okay, but if that is the truth, what is the one thing that I can do to make sure that I'm going to get to my financial freedom growth rate? And that at that stage was for me to invest in property. Okay, so it means basically that the quality of any answer is directly determined by the quality of the question now that you're going to ask. Now I've sent out a survey today to my database, and some of you have already received it, and I see I'm asking for advice. Okay, now why on earth would I ask for advice? Because I want to understand what is going on and why is it that people do not, something that to me at this stage feels and seems to be straightforward and simple. The majority of people don't get that. And from the responses that I'm busy getting, I see that the things that I'm asking them what their problems are, and immediately they counter me by asking me for advice. What must I do in the case of this? What must I do if this is my situation? In other words, immediately, instead of using the opportunity, they start asking questions, but the question that they ask is not appropriate for the level of the game that they are playing. And that is where the problem is going on. So if the moment that you ask the wrong questions, you're going to get the wrong answer. Or I can't answer you because unless you've got the basics, unless you understand the basics, the answer that I'm going to give you is not going to make any sense. So ask the right questions, then of course you're going to get the right answer. But then we need to take it one step further. I've already explained to you in terms of the focus that the 80-20% principle. So take the question and ask, I can almost say, what's the top 20% that I need to know? But once you understand that, then ask the question again, okay, what is the one thing that I can focus on? Because that has to relate back to the formula for riches. And the formula for riches is basically my intent equals my focus. So what is the intent? What is the only thing that I need to focus on if I want to become financially free? And the only thing that I need to focus on, guess what, is I have to outperform. What investments can I do to outperform my financial freedom growth rate, taking that I've got, in other words, the timing as well as the money, the surplus that I've got, into consideration. What can I do and what investments can I do and how can I go about in doing that? Then I know that I'm on the right track. So we can literally distill down financially every single question that you have just back to one thing, and that is the first thing: what is your financial freedom growth rate? So unless you understand and unless you know your financial freedom growth rate, the next question will not be relevant whatsoever. So once I've determined, let's say in my case in 87 it was 55%, then I say, okay, what investments? Because I knew property was very close, I started looking at property and I started finding out that property could give it to me, and 2 months later I discovered that the business can give that to me as well. Okay, so I then formulated another question, and that question is something that I'm teaching my students on a day-to-day basis, and that is, what is the one thing that I can do right now? Because once I've got the big picture, now I have to break it down into a day, a week, a month, and a moment to moment, because otherwise I won't be able to manage that. And the way that I'm doing that is by asking the question, what is the one thing that I can do right now that will have the biggest impact on my power goal? In other words, what can I do today that's going to help me to reach my power goal? And then I can break that down and say, what is the one thing that I can do right now? Not today, but what is the one thing that I can do right now that's going to help me to get to my power goal? And my power goal is what I'm focusing on, and that is at that stage was to get to at least 55% growth on my investment. Right. So it's actually a very straightforward, a very simple process, on condition that we're asking the right questions. Okay, so one of the questions that I'm asking at the moment is, how can I help my students to establish a habit? Now, why is that important? Because we've got limited amounts of willpower. And if we're going to try to use willpower over a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year period, it's simply, we've got X amount of reserves, and that reserves is replenished each and every day. So we need to get the timing right to form habits. So I'm using willpower to form a habit, because the moment that I created the habit, then it's going to be a lot easier. So instead of forcing myself the whole time over and over to do certain things by sheer willpower, I rather rely on a habit. And it's a lot easier to form habits, and the right habits, by using willpower, focused willpower, in order to get to the outcome. And that's one of the reasons why I took on the challenge to say, okay, but for the next 91 days, because I'm breaking my life in 91-day cycles, I'm going to do certain exercises each and every day, and practice, do physical exercises, and in order to get my heart rate over 120 for a 30-minute duration at a time. And then I said that I'm going to give you feedback. So why on earth do I do this? Well, I want to train the muscle, the brain muscle, in order to understand what is a, let's call it, what is a habit. And once I've established a habit, and through that habit, maybe challenge one or two of you to do the same thing. I'm not saying that you should go for 120 beats per minute for half an hour. Make it 5, make it 10, as long as you take up the challenge in order to change that who you are into that you want to become. Now, at the same time, while I'm doing that, I'm recapping basically what I've learned up to then in the morning, because the ritual at the moment is that I've changed it from the afternoon to the morning. So I literally summarize the previous day and what happened the previous day during that half an hour session. So not only do I use it in terms of getting my heart rate right, but I'm also doing a recapping. And to me, that is working. And I hope that maybe something like this can help you as well. I'm not sure. So I just need to go to my TomTom to see what is that I've done. I'll add this a little bit later on. I've done, active time was just over 30 minutes, and my heart rate was 125 beats per minute for the duration of at least 30 minutes. So that is what I've done. Now, perhaps let me give you another tip. We get the big picture, okay? That is what is the one thing in my case, or in your case, it will be the IRR, or the investment growth rate must be bigger than your financial freedom growth rate. And then the smaller focus, in other words, the bullseye focus, is what is the one thing that I can do right now that can and will give me that outcome that I'm looking at. Okay, so I see we've got a couple of people here. William, welcome. Kobus, thank you. Martina, welcome here. And then Chris and a few other people. If you've got any questions whatsoever, please feel free to ask me. So till next time, then I'm going to see you, and be prepared. I'm going to do this from time to time. I've got nothing else to do. I'm basically waiting for my first grandchild to arrive. So Tanya said to me that we can't travel and we can't go away, and I'm sitting here and it should be due date any date. Actually tomorrow I think is the due date, and that's why I've got the I've got the time to do funny stuff like this. Right, so thank you for your time, and I'll see you then at a later stage.